So I don't watch mainstream news. So the fact I know about this means it's a big deal. So living men and women who are caught camping on City of Moreton Bay land or City of Brisbane land can now be fined up to $8,065, making life so much harder for people experiencing homelessness. Now, side note, so if you're homeless, you don't have a fixed address, so you're not paying council rates to begin with, and there is no permanent address to send a fine to. But anyway, so councils issuing fines to homeless individuals for sleeping on public land is a blatant overreach of corporate policy. Your council has an ABN. Corporate policy disguised as law. So these fines are they illegitimate? Because don't we all have a right to exist? Every living man or woman has the inherent right to exist and rest where they can, provided they cause no harm. No council, aka a corporate entity, has the right to deny someone the ability to sleep. And is there a lack of contractual obligation? Fines issued by councils operate on contractual principles. If a man or woman has not agreed to the council's rules, which apply to corporate persons, not living beings, is there a lawful obligation to pay? Unforceable without consent. For a fine to be enforceable, the council must prove it was lawfully served and that the individual is within their jurisdiction. A homeless individual with no fixed address has not consented to council regulations. So how does one go about challenging such fines? If someone is fined for sleeping on council land, they could hypothetically, I'm just speaking out loud, could respond with, I do not consent to this fine and I do not operate under the jurisdiction of your corporate policies. They may say, show me the lawful authority that allows you to deny me my basic human right to rest. Or, provide evidence of a signed agreement where I have consented to be bound by your council's corporate bylaws. Now, since these councils function as corporations, their regulations apply only to legal persons. For example, residents, ratepayers, businesses. A living man or woman who does not consent to their rules operates outside of that system. As I said, a homeless man or woman with no fixed address doesn't fall into any of those categories. Now, how can this fine be rebutted legally? A council fine for sleeping on public land can be rebutted lawfully and legally. The approach depends on how much you want to engage with their system, their regulations. So number one, let's look at this. Now, this approach denies the jurisdiction from the outset, refusing to contract with the council's corporate policies. Key points to this challenge. No harm, no crime. For a crime to exist, there must be a victim. Sleeping on public land causes no harm. No jurisdiction without consent. So councils operate as corporations, enforcing corporate policies, bylaws. Without a contract or agreement, they have no lawful authority over a man or woman. And lastly, the right to exist. every man or woman has the inherent right to rest and exist. If you would like some hypothetical guidelines on responses to the council as a rebuttal, just send me a DM on my Instagram, which I'll put in the description of this video. Right, so if you are one to prefer fighting within their legal framework, you could look at using technicalities and procedural loopholes. For example, unlawful fine disguised as revenue collection. Many councils fine people to generate revenue, not for legitimate legal reasons. Next one, disproportionate and unreasonable. Under administrative law, fines must be proportionate. Penalising someone who is homeless for sleeping when they have no alternative is arguably oppressive. It is extremely disproportionate. $8,000. Failure of proper service. If the fine wasn't properly issued, for example, handed to you directly or mailed to a valid address, it can be challenged. And something really important here that I don't see the mainstream media sharing. Is it a human rights violation? Fining homeless individuals may breach rights under local or international human rights laws. If you want to know more about that, again, get in touch. So, there are legal processes to appeal such fines and infringements. Request for evidence, demand proof of jurisdiction, valid service and legal justification. You could also challenge on procedural grounds, argue the fine was incorrectly issued, improperly served or lacks a legal basis. One may then also have to escalate it to a tribunal. Now the thing is, individuals, living men and women who are homeless, are they really going to have the resources to do any of this? So if you want a letter to rebut an infringement to the council, again, let me know. Now, gosh, which approach is best? If you want to stand outside their system, you would use the first lawful rebuttals. But if you prefer to beat them at their own game, you would use the statutory law legal approach. Now, some could use both, right? Start with the lawful approach and fall back on the legal technicalities if necessary. Now, in Brisbane, the specific infringement for sleeping on council land is typically categorised under illegal camping or unauthorised camping. So this refers to setting up of tents or caravans or sleeping in vehicles on public land without proper authorisation. The Public Land and Council Assets Local Law 2014 governs the use of public spaces in Brisbane. Under this law, camping on public land without a permit is prohibited. Additionally, the Brisbane City Council specifies that it is illegal to camp overnight in a vehicle on roads or road-related areas such as footpaths or public cycle paths unless in designated areas. Now, recent enforcement actions have intensified, with the Brisbane City Council issuing 24-hour notices to vacate for individuals camping in areas such as Musgrave Park in West End and Kurilpa Point Park. Failure to comply can result in fines and the removal of the tents and belongings by council officers, often with police assistance. Side note, these are public servants. Their salaries are paid by taxpayers on a local, state and federal level. You may want to have a look at their fiduciary duties. It's important to note that while these laws aim to regulate the use of public spaces, they have been met with criticism from various community leaders and organisations who advocate for more supportive solutions to address homelessness. The thing is, at the end of the day, these councils aren't giving a solution. Where do they want these homeless or these unhoused souls to go? As far as I'm aware, there isn't a platform 9 3/4 at Roma Street Station where they can just run into a wall and disappear. Councils are enforcing these fines and removals without providing a real solution, just shifting the problem out of sight. It is a cruel, bureaucratic game where the most vulnerable are being punished simply for existing. Instead of addressing the root causes, lack of affordable housing, systemic unemployment, mental health struggles, and social displacement, governments are just criminalising homelessness. Another side note, councils are not a third tier of government at all. We have federal government, we have state government. Councils aren't local government. They are given authority through acts through the state. There is no designated alternative. There is no platform 9 3/4 where people can magically vanish. Where are they expected to go? Nowhere. Just not here. That's the implicit message. The unspoken goal is displacement. Move them to a different park, a different street, until that area cracks down too. Push them into already overcrowded shelters that often have strict rules, curfews, and unsafe conditions. Pressure them into moving along with fines they can't pay, leading to escalated legal trouble. So why aren't solutions being implemented? The lack of real solutions isn't an accident. Maybe it's a policy choice. Because you know what? Maybe they need to budget better. Governments could create safe zones, designated areas where unhoused individuals can sleep without harassment. They could provide housing first initiatives. Many countries have proven that giving people stable housing first actually reduces homelessness in the long term. They could fund public amenities, more 24-hour rest stops, sanitation stations, and free shelters. They could redirect enforcement budgets. Instead of funding rangers to fine people, redirect those funds and resources to housing assistance programs. But instead, they push a punitive approach because it makes homelessness invisible to ratepayers and tourists. It shifts responsibility onto charities instead of government programs. And it keeps the cycle of fines, debt, and bureaucracy alive, feeding the system. What on earth can be done? Well, there have been media outlets this week sharing public pressure and awareness. The more we speak out, the harder it becomes for councils to justify these policies. Legal challenges. Fining people for existing may violate human rights protections in some jurisdictions. Legal advocates can challenge these policies. And power in numbers, community-led solutions. Some grassroots groups provide safe sleeping zones, mutual aid and legal support. Like I said, if you would like to chat about this one-on-one or would like some guidance on templates for the letters that could be sent to the council if you do receive one of these infringements, just shoot me a DM on Insta. Happy to have a chat. Please subscribe to this channel. We are a non-profit, unincorporated project providing support to our community.